So that started. Like I said, thank you again for joining, and let's kick off with the intros. Farhana, would you like to start?
Hello, thank you. So Farhana Kudos, I'm a global diversity inclusion leader, which means that I work across the spectrum, building strategy, designing systems of equity, and just creating good movement. I've worked in a number of sectors, namely financial services, banking, technology, and broadcasting media. And Ebony, thank you for inviting me into space because the socioeconomic factors, you said it a second ago, they can so easily be overlooked when attempting to build today's workforce. So a very important conversation to keep us right. So that's me.
Everyone's here, so I'll jump in. It doesn't say you're on mute, but I can't hear. I'll jump in anyway. So my name's Leon Carford. It's really weird saying your own full name, isn't it? Every time I say it, that's not my name. I'm the head of risk and compliance for a business called Atlanta Group, which is an insurance broker. No one's ever heard of Atlanta Group because it's really sort of a holding company that has a number of insurance brands that sit underneath it. One that people tend to have heard of is Swinton Insurance, but we do all kinds of the insurance that you would see on a price comparison websites, all the stuff that actual real people buy. 39. I've got a daughter who's 3 today. It's her birthday today, and looks like I'm in a fighter jet. I wish I was, but I'm sat in the Trafford Centre car park in rainy Manchester. I would say that I came from a very working class, in the stereotypical sense, family. I am of mixed heritage, so I have a white mom and a black dad. A friend of mine said a few weeks ago that we had to save up to be poor, which is a phrase I'm going to borrow from him. That's how it felt for me growing up. And I think with that, there's been a number of challenges along the way that perhaps I didn't even realize earlier in my career or as a younger person. And as Farhana said, we don't really talk about this side of things when we're talking about diversity and inclusion. And when we think about some of the networks that our workplaces are starting to build, and there is some good stuff happening, this isn't one of them. It's not one of the networks. It's not a major factor that's being considered. So I think it's a really, really interesting topic to cover today. I'm happy that we're a little quiet, actually, because it means we can all jump in a little bit and have a really good chat about it, and then hopefully we can produce some maybe a couple of nice articles off the back of it where we sort of capture some key thoughts. So nice to meet everyone.
Hi, I'm Sally Clayton. I'm Chief Risk Officer for Legal & General's Retail Division. Have always worked in financial services and about 20 years now in second line risk functions. I've been with the Legal & General Group for 13 years, working for various parts of the group. I guess for me, it's the socio-economic is quite personal. So I was born and grew up in Portsmouth, which is quite a poor area of the country. I didn't go to university. And I guess as someone who reports into the C-suite of a FTSE 100 company, I'm actually quite an outlier as someone who didn't go to university. I have since, I've done a degree and I've done a postgrad. And the benefit of that is actually the companies I've worked for have paid for those. So I didn't actually incur any debt in doing so, but it just wasn't a path open to me. When I was at that younger age, and I think I find it quite frustrating that we have things like job descriptions that say you must have a degree, for example. And so whilst I'm interested in all diversity, I guess this is a particular thing that I would like to change. Until about 3 years ago, I actually found the whole thing quite uncomfortable. I never lied. I was very open on my CV around my path and what I'd done, but actually in forums, I was never really open about it. When these conversations would happen, I would kind of keep quiet. But actually, in the last 3 years, I've very much embraced it. And, I've got a voice and an opportunity at a level. And for me, it's my responsibility now to be very clear on that, to help people understand that just because you haven't necessarily followed a traditional path and you didn't have those opportunities when you were younger, it doesn't mean these people aren't capable. So, this is one I would like us to be talking much more openly about.
You make a really interesting point there, Sally. It becomes a little bit easier to talk about, doesn't it, as you get a little bit more experience? Because your CV now presumably is really, really strong, and you are on a good career trajectory. You're sort of already there.
Yeah.
Earlier in your career, it is something I think that you try and avoid, and you don't necessarily want to put out there to people as much as you can now. So it's really important, I think, for people at different levels to have this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's also a benefit, Sally, that you're in a senior position, and having gone through that experience of I've been there, I felt disadvantaged, and you found your own pathway. But I think the advantage is that being senior, we have an opportunity to say, actually, should others go through that, and promote those conversations. Because one of the things I often talk about is, let's not make something like socioeconomic factors a HR thing, a policy. Let's not say the words, shelve it, put it in a document and leave it there. And how we overcome that is for individuals like yourself at that senior level, living and breathing and showing that way, but also understanding. So I think it's also a benefit experience, but also where you are.
Yeah, and I think it, as a young person, I think it drives a different hunger in you, that you want something that you want to achieve, and you want a different lifestyle or different opportunities as you grow up, even though that isn't what your parents might have had in the generations. And don't get me wrong for 1 minute, I came from a very loving home. I was surrounded by lots of family, still am, have a very large, very loyal family who all look out for each other. So I had all of that safe environment. I guess what we lacked a bit was the financial means, and it was actually my parents that, even though I came from that background, that gave me the belief you can do anything, you can go out and do anything. And that's what I did, and I just want others to understand that. And Legal and General are quite good at this. We do a lot around future talent and bringing school and college children in and having it, and that's, I guess, is what made me be much open about my career path and my background, and helping those people understand that actually if you go into anywhere and show that drive and are willing to have a go at anything, people will help you and support you, and that is how you progress.
I've got a slightly different version of that event. So you sort of saying there, Sally, that it sort of gave you that hunger. Because I think my poor background, really, I feel like I had the hunger already, and I've then struggled with the idea of coming from a poor background. So I had to get 3 buses to school, and actually went to a really nice secondary school where the people I was sat in school with had swimming pools, and their parents had proper jobs, and I thought these guys were all like super wedged. And I remember walking home one day with a group of my friends, and they were having a big debate over whether they've got more Adidas or Nike in their wardrobes. And I think, I don't have any of this stuff. I've got stuff from the charity shop. And for me, I really struggled with this sort of feeling of like not having value. I really got in my own head about, we say the word value. For a lot of people, you start thinking financials and figures and numbers, and I sort of equated my own sense of worth with, I need to have these material things, and I need to have a nicer accent like these guys do. And I wish my mum and dad didn't have a tiny terraced house. I wish they had a swimming pool and a nice car. And for me, it was a real struggle just to sort of like get out of my own head and sort of learn to reframe that. It's taken many years, I think, for me to sort of realize that actually it did give me a lot of strength. I just didn't know at the time. To learn to sort of value my own opinion and my own abilities rather than actually using all these external influences. So it was interesting to hear your slightly different angle on that.
I think it's very similar background that I had, Leon, in what you described, and with you, Sally, as well. And I think for me, excuse me, for me it taught me more gratitude. It taught me the fact that actually by not having, or by having little, was more than enough. And so as I've grown up, gone through education, gone through the world of work, I think it's kept me quite humble in terms of recognizing that we could have, the best pencil case at school, right? The shining new one every new term that comes. And my friends, every single friend had, new pencil case, shiny new pencil that hasn't been used. Whereas I had one pencil, one pen, and maybe a rubber if I was lucky. And there they were coming into school every term, shiny new bag, shiny new pencil case, you name it. And not just a pencil case, but colours, felt tips, crayons, you name it. And I think as I've particularly come into the world of work, what it allows me to do is keep myself rooted. But remember, actually, it's those access points that is different for each of us. We may have similar stories, or completely different ones, but access is so important, and that defines how we end up. Now, I've just noticed a comment in the chat box from Isaac. So what might be good is to just go back a little and just be clear on what we think socioeconomic factors are. So I think we've got into conversation here, haven't we?
We have.
We can't hear you, Ebony.
We can't hear you, but
Ebony.
let me continue while you sort that out. So if I start off, I guess, with my one-liner, very basically what I think socioeconomic factors are. So I think it's the barriers, it's the differences that in our social element, social factor, that makes us who we are. So that will be things like income or education. It will be things like the jobs of our parents. Did they have a very high labour intensive role? Do they have a professional job? Leon, you hinted at that, right? It's also talks to things like what's the culture? What access do I have? So the social economic barriers, and they're just a few, are the factors that make us who we are, but also define what we end up having access to, the opportunities we have, and I'm going to say our success. And particularly when I bring it back into the workplace, it can affect how employees show up or not. It affects how we're perceived, and it affects how we interact with each other. And I'm going to give you a quick example. So that's what I think socioeconomic barriers are. It's those factors that make us who we are, that are not skills-based or accreditation-based, but actually are determined by our circumstances, our background and circumstances. So I'm going to give you a quick example, if I can.
I was going to say, just really quickly, just to support kind of what you're saying as well, Farhana, because I completely agree. By the way, both of you, all of you, everything you've said, I know I'm resonating with. But I think it's quite interesting as well that the access to opportunities is limited in certain areas, and like if you look at the country, if you take the UK as a whole, it tends to be like the north, there's less opportunities, less access, poorer working class people. And then also if you go into that further, it's around kind of people in ethnic minorities tend to be grouped in communities that don't have as much access as other communities. So I think there's definite kind of links there, which then obviously the factors pile up. But yeah, I'm sure we'll be covering more on this. I'm going to let you run.
But let's touch upon that, Ebony, since you mentioned it. So I'm going to give you an actual solution as well that I've done and tried and tested in terms of real life scenario, what you've picked up there. So you're absolutely right. There's a difference between working class, non-working class, ethnicity, race, etc., and the north and south divide of the UK, 100%. So what does that look like in the workplace as an example? What that looks like is it changes and influences who we see, the talent we see coming into our organisation, the talent that we see seeing our job adverts, actually applying for it, and then possibly, if they're lucky to go through. I'm going to give you an example in terms of access. So a few years ago, what we recognised was we, as an organisation, we were a technology-based organisation. We were fighting for technical expertise. So whether that's engineers, architects, those were the type of people that we're looking for. And naturally, we were competing against the likes of IBM, Microsoft, the big players. So we need to do something different. And what we also recognised was regionally, what does our geographic pool of people look like? And so what we realised was access was a problem. So if you looked at individual households, these were individuals from the global majority. So in other words, the BAME sector. And what we recognised was actually there were individuals that just didn't have access to a computer. Whether they couldn't afford to buy one, whether they didn't have one in the household, they just didn't have access. So how would they actually know about me as an employer, and how would they actually physically go onto an electronic device and apply for a role? So what did we do? We then created hub points in different areas, but also in our offices, where there was a simple computer stationed, where people from the public could just come in and have a browse of who we were, any roles that we'd advertised, and if they wanted to, apply for a role. And so that access point, Ebony, does talk to the North and South divide, but it does also talk to other trait characteristic differences. That means that where I came from, I don't have an access to a computer or other resources. So how as employers are we thinking about that and trying to break those barriers?
I think one of the challenges in this area as well is, if you're trying to get gender diversity or diversity in ethnicity, it's very obvious. Whereas actually you can't look around the office, for example, and know who comes from what background just by looking at them. Now, there are some indicators that people will pick up on, which will give you an idea, but I think it's on the people that come for that background, and that's why I've tried to embrace it more in the last few years, to tell your story, because it isn't obvious. Yes, it's obvious that I am a woman, and actually the leadership team that I sit on is exactly 50-50, not engineered that way. I don't think, it's just kind of how it's evolved, but no one would look around that table necessarily and know the backgrounds unless people are telling their story. And I went to a lunch with some of our operational people yesterday, and I just happened to be sitting to someone who's from Grimsby, and they told me they had moved to Cardiff because the prospects were better. And I was asking and saying, what do you think about your future? What do you want to create? And I told them then about my background. That's how I started. I started in operations. I did various different roles. I got involved in projects, but I think there are definitely the kind of, if you want to call a computer a physical barrier. So there are those barriers as well. But I think the more we go out and we talk about our story and we tell people how we got to where we got to, because there's definitely an assumption. Well, actually, someone said to me yesterday, we were just chatting, what university did you go to? And I went, I didn't go to university. And it's those sorts of things. There is an assumption that because you do what you do, you went through a certain path. And from a diversity perspective, you can't look at someone in the way you can with some of the other diversity aspects and tell where the diversity is. But when you talk about the conversation, it's as important in a conversation. We all know that you get better decision making when you get diversity of thinking. And that this is just as important, this kind of area in that diversity of thinking as the male female or whatever other area you want to think about.
Yeah, just to build on your point there about it not being something that's obvious, until Ebony contacted us and we started talking about this as a topic, I'd not really even considered it in the sort of DE&I work that I do in the networks that we have. And I started thinking about then, well, we've never really captured in this data, and we've not done things like considered any pay gaps. When we do our annual pulse survey, sort of net promoter score, employee satisfaction survey, this isn't ever a factor or a question or a characteristic that we capture. So we don't actually know, or we're not even asking people who, what their background is, whether this is a factor in our workplaces, which would then make things you might do to remove barriers or to make this a sort of a level playing field. You've not got a basis to measure from there. So I think I'm really excited when Ebony invited us on, because I think it's such an interesting topic, and actually it's got me thinking now I need to get back to work and start to build some of these things in so it actually becomes a factor and it's something that we do talk about.
Do you know, Leon, does your employer capture state versus private education?
I don't think we do. No.
So I know we capture that, but that doesn't then necessarily tell you, it is a factor, definitely. But yeah, we don't go any further than that at the moment. And obviously it's optional as to whether people confirm that. So
yeah.
And the other thing is in the UK, we're okay, but in some countries other than UK, you're not legally allowed to ask for some of these things.
Yeah.
So those are the additional elements.
Yeah.
But I want to provide, so I agree with everything you've said there, Sally and Leon, but I'm going to just be devil's advocate. I'm going to provide a slightly different view. And this is a valid view that we as leaders must take into account. So Sally, you talked about if I'm not sharing my, socioeconomic factors with you, you won't know about that. At the end, you talked about, you know, something similar. The however is, and we've got to find a solution for this, is it cannot always be on the individual to be vulnerable, to open up and say, hey, I haven't got much money today, so I can't join you for lunch today. Like, first of all, that's vulnerable. What's the perception that gives? So, and the other thing is, you know, whether we admit it or not, and whether we like to believe this happens or not, in reality, there is discrimination that comes on the back of that. As human beings, we change our perceptions as a result of Farhana saying, sorry, I can't join you for lunch today because I haven't got the money today, I haven't got the money this week, right? And the consequences of that can be far, right? So just to play devil's advocate, but an absolutely valid point we as employers must be thinking about is, let's not always put it on the individual. How are we coming to the table to actually recognise what those socioeconomic factors are, and by default, how we design that into the process?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Isaac said in the chat as well, it should be a two-way street. Completely agree.
Yeah.
Not everybody is going to jump in and stand up and advertise this, and it's a difficult conversation to have, isn't it? Yeah. Especially when you've got that perception and the idea that this is a judgment factor. So if I haven't been to university, or I've got this kind of background, or I've got an accent that I'm already aware of, I'm not going to then walk around with a big flag saying, you know, treat me differently. I just want to get on with my work and be known like that instead.
I can't hear you again, Ebony.
We're trying to lip read here, Ebony.
What is going? I'll be back. Sorry.
I can hear you
can hear
now.
me. Oh, of course. At least I didn't swear then. Sorry, guys. I was going to say my headphone is not playing ball with me today. But no, I think it's definitely got to be a two-way street. I think it's on people to be vulnerable and to share themselves as individuals and connect with people. But on the flip side, they can't do that if there isn't a safe space. If they don't feel that they can be secure, or that they're not going to be judged, or that people aren't going to look at them different because they didn't all go to Oxford and Cambridge or whatever top university it might be, a Russell Group. And I think it's definitely like a two-way street, but the onus right now should be on like employers to do more to provide that safe space and that culture. But it's interesting as well, like some of the physical barriers that you've mentioned, because I know, like, for example, L&G, I think, Sally, you did a program, was it last year, about giving out laptops to people who were working, especially at like junior levels.
Yeah.
And yeah, the cost impact on that must have been a bit high at the time, but the result and the return and the work and the people you got through and the diversity of thought is just priceless. So I think, you know, it's
and it goes back to that, people like me. So when I was, you know, younger, in my 20s and starting out in my career, I didn't see people like me in these roles. And I think that's the part. And actually, I don't think they were in those roles 25 years ago. And I guess that's why, you know, the only way we're going to break that barrier down is to start being more overt about that, because actually then I think people who are probably at the level I was then will start opening up, and hopefully will feel, you know, I definitely, shame is a strong word, but I there was definitely a level of shame for me around, oh my goodness, you know, I need to keep quiet and not talk so openly about this, because I really did feel like it would halt my progression because I didn't see those people. And it's like, you know, if I can just even make one person think it's possible, regardless of their backgrounds, that this is a career path for them, then it's, you know, on me to speak up.
And just adding on to that example of laptops, again, just trying to be more practical solutions for those on the call or that might hear it after. So as an organisation, we go through IT hardware like no tomorrow. We've got over 20,000 employees globally, etc. Now, what that means is that over a 2 to 3 year cycle, we will go through new laptops. Now, what does that look like? That looks like at the end of a laptop life cycle, we will just bin or get rid of the laptops. So how do we then capitalize on that? Because those laptops are still brand new, state of the market, right? Maybe number 2 in the list rather than number 1.
Send them my way. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Second job going.
So what we started to do was go into a 2-year cycle of, tidying those laptops up, making it good, and actually giving them away. Not even selling them, not even saying go to the recycle bin to be safely deposited, but actually we kept those laptops and we went through a cycle, and it became a 3-month cycle of getting a load of laptops that were end of life, recycling them, cleansing them, and saying, here you go, university student, school student, or low income family who would like a laptop. And let's be honest, that didn't cost us anything. That cost me an engineer 1 day a month, and that was it. And so some of these solutions are easy, right? We just need to think about wider about the perspectives, and think about how those socioeconomic factors are preventing people coming into the workplace.
Yeah, and I mean, another obvious one is like the suits. Something we do, and I'm sure other companies do, is, you know, the donation of old work clothing and suits and things so people go for interviews. And I've seen dry cleaners who do like free cleaning and things like that, if, you know, because they are the barriers for people that I think, you know, probably the average fortunate person doesn't even think about. And you know, not necessarily their fault, but it's not just a barrier for them, so it's not something they think about. But you know, not everyone can afford a suit, and an argument for me is, actually, does it matter? I want someone to come in who looks tidy and presentable, but actually I don't really care if they're wearing a suit. I want them to articulate a really good answer to the question I'm asking them, to understand whether they can do the job, not whether they look. I've seen lots of people in suits who unfortunately are not really great at the job, so it's not a good indicator. But like it or not, it is a barrier. You know, so there are lots more things we can do in that space.
Yeah.
100%. And sorry, just to interject, with the interview attire, like I've even experienced it in my early career, trying to get interviews. And I remember, and it's crazy to think back, actually. I remember going, and I remember having my hair out. I love my curls. Like, my curls are something I'm very, very proud of, and I love them. So I had my hair out, I had a nice dress on, I had leggings on because it was hot. It's July, it's London, it was really hot, and for want of a better word, when it's really hot, tights are just not my friend. So we had leggings on, and we had nice shoes. I was clean, tidy, smelled good, presentable. Yeah, go to the interview, and I got told, oh well, she didn't have quite the right look, or she's not quite the right fit. And the recruiter at the time actually said to me, look, Ebony, I think it might be because of your hair, and because you're wearing leggings, and we talked a bit about actually my size having an impact, being obviously mixed race, having my hair out, and how that might make me look untidy, which is crazy to think. I mean, we're going back a few years, but it's crazy to think that. And so I didn't have the money at the time. I didn't have I didn't have a job. I didn't have the money at the time. So she actually spent 50 quid and bought me a suit jacket from M&S. And I braved the tights at that time for a couple of hours, and had the leggings in my bag, I'll be honest, for after the interview. And we weren't getting on the tube with tights. And yeah, and you know, it's funny because I actually tied my hair up, sleeked it all back, made it look more westernized, shall we say, and had the blazer jacket on, had the tights on, and suddenly every single interview I went to, I got second stages and was getting offers. So it's crazy to think I had to do that to prove that I looked better, or looked wealthier, or looked like I had more money, and looked cleaner than what I was before, even though before I was myself. Yet I had to change the way I look, change the way I should be perceived to get the interview. And even though times have changed, I don't think they've changed crazily. So people still have to do that, and it's really sad.
Got a question for you, Ebony, as a recruiter.
Oh.
Sorry, you're meant to be questioning us, but
I've got questions for you too, Leah. No.
you're talking to your clients. Are you still finding they've got those stuffy old job descriptions that they're putting your way, where we want a red brick university and we want somebody from Oxbridge, and it's a face-to-face interview and we want people in a suit? Are we still finding that, or is that starting to change?
So I'll be honest, there is it's starting to change. So I am hearing more people saying that they're open to different universities. There are still a few select, I'm going to be completely transparent. There are still a few select clients, especially across, more in the asset management, investment banking, that kind of old way of thinking of no, it needs to be a red brick, which is a bit disappointing. And it's a bit disappointing that they're saying, has to have a degree, because there are people with 5 years of experience who are just as good, but they don't even get the chance for that chat. On the flip side, I'm seeing changes around, that it has to be a top uni. Interviews, a lot of them are done by teams in the first kind of stage. So a shirt is necessary, but not a full suit. I think we are slightly moving away from the suit era. And I think people are just, unfortunately, they're not fully switched on to this area in D&I and those kind of concerns, and thinking, well, actually, this person might have a lot of experience and a lot of, they got a second instead of a first class degree, or they had an apprenticeship instead of uni. And I think that's the shift that we need to now make, and just kind of figuring or thinking about different backgrounds, that lower economic piece, and especially around the salaries that are kind of offered, and the commutes that are expected, which obviously factoring in where people live, how far people are commuting, and how much that is going to cost. Mm-hmm. So we're getting there, but I still see it a little bit in JDs.
Yeah.
But to be fair, I purely recruit financial services, which has always been known for being more particular around the look in FS, and I guess the backgrounds, which we're seeing the shift, but not as fast as I want it to be.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm actively looking, but whenever I do look in the market at other roles, and I'm in FS as well, so sort of for me to progress, very often I see in the job description MBA preferred, strongly preferred, MBA required, and I've never had the money to be able to go and do an MBA. I've unfortunately not worked for companies that would sponsor it, and I've never been able to, save up that money and put that to one side. I've always sort of, been building financially. I've not had the time to stop working to focus on an MBA. I would really love when we see job adverts, if we, instead of MBA required, what elements of that MBA are you looking for? What skills and characteristics of somebody who's got an MBA are you looking for? Because I've done all of those. I can talk in financial terms, I can do accounting, a lot of the syllabus of an MBA I've got experience of, I can answer competency questions on and give examples of.
You probably have more practical experience with this thing, right? Because the MBA is great, but it's not giving you the actual, this is what it's like in a real life scenario.
Yeah. So I think as employers, I think we need to really have a look at the way we are recruiting and bringing people into the organisation. And as a recruiter, Ebony, push back as well when you get one of those old stuffy job descriptions and try and push it.
Believe me, we do. I think it's hard as a recruiter, because ultimately they know that there are 200 other recruiters out there, so they know that if you push back too hard and annoy that client, then the job's gone and they're gone to the next person, right? On the flip side, you do want to educate and support and sort of, and guide. So the way I do it is I do push back and ask the question on, why is this degree necessary, or what is it that you're looking for out of that? On the flip side, what I also do is when I do submit candidates, if I come across someone who hasn't got a degree and is absolutely amazing, equally as the ones that have, I still put them forward, and I still try and at least put them in front of the hiring manager. And I'll be honest, sometimes that client still comes back and says, no, we're looking for stronger academics, or we're looking for someone with more experience. But at least I know I've done them and put that person in front of them, and they have at least reviewed that CV, whereas previously, you know, just applying through a portal, it might not have even got in front of the hiring manager. So because they didn't have a degree, like someone in between goes, okay, no degree, boom, no. So I think it's really, really tricky, but I am trying to push back. I'm trying to get more people on sessions like this to understand why we need to and how it actually benefits them. Because that's the other thing I think people are missing is, well, you're missing out on some amazing, hardworking grafters who will be loyal because they're given the opportunity that no one else would give them. So I know that's how like when I started, I was loyal through it. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not loyal now, by the way, but you know, loyal through and through because I was grateful for that business. I put in the late nights. I really grafted because I was like, well, thanks for giving me the shot. Hopefully, I will be pushing back more though. So yeah, step me up a call, you head of recruitment, Leon.
And just to add on to that, I think it's exactly that, right? So as part of my data diversity inclusion strategies that I build, the talent funnel is one of the areas I look at. And two things there. One thing is around recognizing that the first people that talent might come across is our talent recruitment team, right? So the likes of you, Ebony. So whether it's internal recruiters or agencies that we partnered up with, both of those were the pathways that I looked at. And one of those was actually broadening the perspectives of our internal recruitment team, working with them to look at JDs and how we start to design them. So Leon, to your point, we looked through the whole CV, we looked at language, we looked at the criteria we're asking for, and we really started to adopt a skill-based approach. And that skill-based approach flows through not just into JDs, but into assessments, into interviews. And that was a game changer. So one of the ways is actually looking at JDs. Number two is actually working with our internal recruitment team, but also external agencies. The external agency work was slightly different in that we started to design some of the things that we wanted to break down in those barriers. We asked them to go out and do some research as well in candidates that we were just not seeing, and why was that, and how do we get them in. So I think if we are to look at a strategic solution for what we've just talked about, recruitment play a fundamental role, but it's also up to us as, you know, designers within the organisation to say we recognise that there will be barriers, and how open are we to break those barriers. So every single one of us has a role to play, absolutely, but we need individuals to lead on certain points. Our recruiters will lead on the recruitment funnel. But yeah, so I think there are some solutions that people can be thinking about, and it does work.
And I think one of the other things that employers definitely need to kind of tackle, or at least try and create a supportive, is around sort of people with imposter syndrome, or feeling that they don't belong, feeling that they're maybe not supposed to be there. Because I think that's the other thing that often you find, if you look at the stats, like people attract diverse talent, but then they struggle to keep them, or they wonder why, especially a lot of people from ethnic minority backgrounds. There is a a lot of stats around people will go into a business and leave within the first couple of years. And then their problem is that they end up going into these businesses, not having the right culture, not feeling supported, leaving, joining another one, same happens again. And then when they're, 10 years into their career applying for a top level role, they get told, oh, but you're too jumpy. You've not had that stability. You've not had enough experience in, a solid organization. So think there's a lot of factors that feed into that, but it is on employers to, again, provide that security. And I mean, what would you guys say around kind of the imposter syndrome effect, and how employers can help with that? Oh, Sally, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm mute. It's another one where imposter syndrome, everyone focuses on it, or certainly where I've seen it from a female perspective. Everyone worries about that women have imposter syndrome, this, that, and the other. Actually, being a woman wasn't the issue for me. That wasn't what created my imposter syndrome. Mine was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be found out at some point that I didn't follow this traditional path and I don't deserve this seat on the exec. I was never bothered that I was a woman, actually. Throughout my career, actually, certainly since I've moved into second line functions, so there's always been lots of strong women, like compliance particularly. You know, I had 3 chief compliance officers in a row that were all strong females, so that was never a problem for me. But again, I think we have to change the view. And a lot of people over the years have said to me, you know, you're here because you've got the skill set, you have the valid challenge, it's fine. But again, I think it's just more talking about it. I think once you get these things out in the open and realize, oh my goodness, that person over there has imposter syndrome, and you look at them and you think, why? And you can't fathom why they've got it, and vice versa. And I think it's just being more honest and open about these things.
Yeah, there's a belief system there, isn't there? I wrote it down when you said it, Sally. Like, does it matter? What a question! It's all these factors we're talking about: people's living conditions, their educational background, and you know what their appearance, their accent. Does it matter? I think we need to start to really unravel some of that, and we do need, as Isaac said earlier, there's sort of that two-way conversation to approach it at both ends to start to unravel that, because it really doesn't matter. Some of the best people, the sharpest people I've worked with, have come from a lower socioeconomic background and haven't been to university, because there's a real skill in there as well, isn't there? There's, you know, it teaches you resilience, pragmatism,
realism,
budgeting. Really important factors in the work. And I've also, on the flip side, worked with people who've come from really privileged backgrounds and have got, you know, a real extensive education section of their CV. It's 2-3 pages on its own, who can't make a common sense decision, or can't sort of reel themselves in, or want to write a 120-page report for a busy exec. So getting that mix is really important to our businesses. It is. And we need to start promoting some of those skills, those like real soft core skills that we're actually bothered about. I always think about my dad when I think about this. So my dad is a joiner by trade. So my granddad came over from the Caribbean after the Second World War, and was invited to the UK to help rebuild the country as an engineer. So he got a trade, and that's what he then taught to his kids: get a trade, and you can get by in life. And so my dad followed in his footsteps, as you know, that's his role model. So he became a joiner. And my dad's text messages are absolutely horrendous. This, you know, the guy has no grammar whatsoever. So his written English is awful. But I now sit on boards for a living, and if I put my dad in a boardroom situation with some of the topics and the issues that the boards are facing, and asked him for his opinion in a boardroom, he'd be as sharp, if not sharper, than a lot of people around the table. He doesn't realise it. He thinks he's not got that skill or that ability, but the pragmatism he's had, and sort of that salt of the earth kind of development and education he's had, means he's really, really sharp and can really quickly analyze a situation. So yeah, what does it matter? What are these factors and the things that are the product of coming from a lower income family? What do they matter?
That's really interesting, because my dad is a carpenter, but he's exactly the same. He is the most articulate person, and I still talk to him like about challenges that I might be having. And to be honest, sometimes I get better advice from him, but I feel exactly the same. If I put him around that board table, he would be so articulate. And growing up, one of the things that he used to love doing with us as kids was debating, and he would be quite provocative, and he still does it. I go in there, and particularly now he's retired and he doesn't see many people, I go in there and I just know he wants to debate about something, and I'm thinking, oh, I haven't got the energy for this. But no, I think that different skill set that it gives you makes you, not afraid to be, one thing I've never been is backward in coming forward, and I've always been very sure of myself and happy to put my point across. And that's one of the natural, no one teaches you that at school necessarily. And it's a great thing that I think actually, you need to be respectful of other people and listen to their opinions, of course, but to have that confidence and be willing to speak up doesn't always exist.
No, it's so true. And it's just really interesting that you guys, similar, like the tradesman kind of background, And again, they've instilled that confidence, that surety, and that belief that it doesn't matter where you came from, as long as you're hardworking and you're a good person, you can achieve and you can believe. And I think what's sad though is that as we're hitting this kind of economic crisis issues, I'm hearing from people that their families are saying, don't go to uni, it's just a lot of debt, there's no guarantee of a job even at the end of it. So we're getting more and more people not going to uni, not feeling confident about having opportunities, not feeling confident in themselves. And also, I think, COVID may have played a little factor, but not even talking anymore. Like the amount of candidates I speak to, and I'm like, well, apply for the role, pick up the phone, ask to speak to someone in recruitment and say, I've put my hat in the ring for this phone. And they're like, pick up the phone, like call them. I'm like, yeah, they've got a switchboard, call them, ask to speak to someone in HR. You might not get through, but you're at least in front of the 50 other people who've applied who've not picked up the phone. So I think, it's just, it's really interesting, like kind of hearing that shift, but the confidence is also shifting, and I guess how we can support people to be more confident.
Yeah, and not lose sight of the fact that, because we quite naturally we're talking a lot about access to the workplace and to certain jobs, but actually we've got people already in the office and in the jobs who are struggling. You sort of mentioned the sort of I don't want to give it the old cliche labels of sort of financial impacts and the cost of living crisis and that kind of thing. I just think it's really wordy, but we do have people that are struggling
But
today.
they are struggling.
Yeah, and we need to really be thinking about the people we've already got as well, not just sort of widening the net of getting more people into the organisation. But to go back to Sally's point earlier, we don't necessarily see what people are going through. So we need to be making interventions in real time for the people that we've got. And having financial struggles is a huge weight to have on your shoulders. It has a mental health impact, doesn't it? It can really lower the well-being of your overall workforce and the productivity of people in the business. So we do need to sort of tie in some of those layers, I think, be thinking about the people that we've currently got.
100%. I think, one of the things at the moment that we've got is like the 4-day week back. Or I know most people are doing hybrid working, but I think there are some companies out there kind of asking all employees to be back in sort of 4 or even 5 days. What's your thoughts on that in terms of kind of the cost impact? Like, is it going to increase that diversity of thought, or is it going to take us back?
That wasn't something I was aware of. I mean, we ask people to come in 2 days a week, and that's for collaboration and to, I'm a firm believer of you've got to have that. These people, how do you build a culture if you never meet people and there are different conversations when you have them face to face and the more casual and even getting to know people, because I think that the challenge with Teams meetings is you kind of tend to go straight into the nitty gritty, whereas in the office when you're sat next to someone you naturally just chat and how's your daughter, what did you watch on telly last night, those sorts of conversations which don't necessarily get fostered on Teams. So I definitely do not believe in 100% not coming into the office, but equally I have no desire for my team to be in 5 or even 4 days a week, because actually it's less productive for me. So there has to be a balance. But it's give and take, right? So it's not, I don't say to people, you must be in 2 days every week. Of course, there'll be weeks where they're in 1 day or not even in at all, but there will be other weeks where they might need to be in 3 or 4 days because there are things that need to happen face to face. We definitely had a lot of challenge post-COVID around people saying, oh, I can't come into the office anymore, or this, that, and the other. And it's like, well, why? You were in there 5 days a week before. Particularly people in London and other areas. I mean, we're getting away from the socio-economic here, but those people were paid a London waiting to come into the office and all those things, and now they don't, so they kind of got a pay rise. But I think going back to someone made the point earlier on give and take, I think most people are pretty reasonable, and they're grown-ups, they can manage their own workloads and stuff. And I think as long as you've got that balance, but I definitely think there is no substitute when you're trying to manage a team in having that face-to-face contact. But I definitely think we don't want to lose that huge advantage that we've got of allowing people flexible working, because again, even the next step on from that is, I don't expect my people to be at their desk 9 till 5. You know, if it works for them to pick the kids up at 3 o'clock and not log back on until 7, I'm okay with that. I don't care when their work gets done, as long as it gets work. So I think it's even that next step on from hybrid around, don't feel like that old traditional day that we used to have to do. I think we can move away from that now and be much more flexible.
Yeah, I think when we label the 4-day week, it's a solution, right? It's a solution as part of many. And what we've got to do, rather than saying, do we agree with the 4-day week, what we've got to ask is, what does it allow? What does it open? Who does it benefit? Who does it give us greater access to? Or who gets better access to the world of work as a result? So absolutely, we need to think about the 4-day work week. I'm an absolute supporter of that. I'm a supporter of hybrid working. I'm a supporter of flexible working. That's where we've got to take our mindset to, because the why and the who is actually, we allow better access, more access to people that never had access before. And to your point, Sally, you know, I had a mum of 2 that would travel all the way from Manchester into the London office.
Wow. And
she did that. I mean, we had an open relationship, we had an open conversation, but she did that as she needed to, right? And after COVID, it might have been a valid point saying, oh, I'm not going to travel down, because there are other means to now help us effectively work together. So for me, it was less about, well, you did it before, why can't you do it now? That didn't come into my mindset. For me, it was about, times have evolved. We now understand circumstances better. And so rather than asking you to come in down into London office once a week, do we even need you to come in once a week? Have we got other mechanisms? Or what are those mechanisms we can create? And so she ended up coming once a month, because we then enabled other ways to do that more effectively. So, but it just to reposition your question, for me, it would be about, what's the value of the 4-day working week and who does it benefit? And that is where we get the answer, rather than who agrees with it and who doesn't. Because that's when we get into a pickle of, actually, I don't agree with it. And then we get into a heated debate, right?
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. I think obviously COVID accelerated what was probably going to happen at some point anyway. You know, you both said flexibility. I think it's flexibility. It's a grown-up way of working, isn't it? But now reflecting what our businesses are saying, you know, is hybrid working working for us? Does it work? Is it productive? And one of the potential answers to that is to then take a step back away from this flexibility that we've built, which can be a massive benefit, as you're saying, for Hannah. So we're asking the wrong question. It's not, is hybrid working good for us? It's, how can we get great at doing this and be really grown up about doing this? I think we need to rephrase the question.
And that's the diversity of thought we talked about earlier, right? So diversity of thought is powerful. Often when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we get stuck on, have we got a diverse people on the call today? Well, actually, I care about that, then I shouldn't need to care, actually. Because what I really care about, where I should get each individual to, is actually diversifying our thought process. So that, you know, if Isaac, you weren't on the call today and you weren't giving your lovely contribution, actually, we've already broadened our mindset to be thinking what you're saying right now. And that's diversity of thought. But yeah.
No, thank you. That was almost a perfect closing line, because I've just realised we are hitting the 2 o'clock mark. I think there might be five minutes or so if anyone did have a last minute burning question that they wanted to either raise their hand and ask or put in the chat. But no, that's why we're all here, and diversity of thought is so important. And I guess I just hope that, at least from this session, everyone's feeling a little bit more inspired and less alone, because we're all thinking this, we're all wanting to make a difference, we're all wanting to kind of make that change. Somebody might be typing.
I mean, feel free to come off mute and
But
say
yeah.
that comment.
All is typing away.
I think Isaac, is that your comment? Feel free to come off mute and just voice it.
Yeah, Isaac, come on.
Yeah, it's been really informative listening to this conversation. I could have added more from different perspectives, but yeah, it's nice to hear this from everybody. So thank you. A lot to think about with my own advocacy work and how I can elevate it to new heights, and bring more people to the table, really. So yeah, thank you.
And your comment, Isaac, spot on. I don't think it's biased at all. I think it's forcing us, for those of us who are not thinking about it, forcing us to think about your perspective. And that's why I said what I said earlier about the 4-day week. It's not about whether I agree with it or not. It's about actually, by encouraging a 4-day week, does it access to your question there? Does it access more of the disabled community? Yeah. If we look at the flexible working, the working from home policies, they are exactly what you've outlined in your comment there. So not biased at all, and I'd say it's something we should all be thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being amazing panelists, all three of you, Leon, Sally, Farhana. I'm really, really lucky to put this event together with you and to have you talk and just even be able to kind of listen and learn. So I'll be staying in touch, obviously. We'll be talking and following up. And Isaac, Maria, Pauline, thank you again for joining us. So appreciated, and it's been lovely to have you on the session.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Cheers,
Thank you. Take care.
everybody.